Is it wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon? I'm asking for a friend. Wistoria Wand and Sword was one of my favourite anime of last year. From a directing and cinematography standpoint, it easily surpassed most of its competitors, and its animation and soundtrack were equally impressive. Whilst it did receive some criticism for the originality of its story and characters, I still greatly enjoyed those aspects. So much so that it made me wish to check out the author's previous and more famous work, Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? Or as everyone who recognises how awful that name is calls it, Danmachi. In fact, the title of this anime is so bad that I believe that was actually the reason it took so long for this show to get dubbed. At the very least, the dubbing team have admitted that they were very skeptical of this series' quality after seeing its title. But luckily for them, and us, Danmachi is actually pretty good. Danmachi tells the tale of Balcranal. He's a very innocent boy who dreams of being the greatest adventurer in the land. Not only that, but he wishes to be the hero from the stories that saves the damsel in distress. You know, every boy's dream. With also being one of the primary reasons he traverses the dungeon, these monster-filled catacombs located beneath the city, as he is unironically going down there to pick up ladies. Hence the anime's awkward title. However, as I said, Bal is innocent, so his approach to this goal is more wholesome than the premise would lead you to think. He doesn't go into the dungeon and start chatting up and hitting on every girl he sees. In fact, he actually goes down there to become stronger and worthy of these women. That's not the only reason he explores the dungeon, nor is it the sole reason he wants to become stronger, but he has basically put women, especially the legendary sword princess Ice Valentine, on a pedestal, and is training so hard so that he can become deserving of recognition in all of its forms. And it's his earnest attempts to improve and take on any challenge that comes his way that, unbeknownst to him, makes him so desirable to all the female characters in this series.
It should have been me, not him! It's not fair!
Bal isn't the most complicated or original protagonist you'll ever meet, but he's likeable enough that you'll be willing to follow him throughout this story. Which is a good thing, as I actually found the story of Danmachi to be pretty underwhelming. At least to begin with.
遠い昔、僕たち神は君たち子供たちの暮らすこの下界に刺激を求めて降りてきた。そして僕たちは決めた。この下界で永遠に君たちと共に暮らそうと。
So the gods have chosen to descend from heaven to play with the mortals below, choosing to forgo their divine power in exchange for great hardships and the inconveniences of human life. Of course, this is only a one-way street. It would be cool if it could go the other way, and the humans get to be gods in heaven, but I guess only the gods are allowed to choose to have more mundane lives, whilst we humans are stuck with what we get. Fortunately, the gods do offer something to us peasants, aka their children, and that is their blessing, essentially the power to fight monsters. And whichever god gives you this power becomes your master and you their servant, with you and their other servants forming their familiar. On top of this power is based on a level system, with the more experience you gain increasing your level and individual abilities, something that is unlocked each time your god drips some of their blood onto your back. Bal, our lead, is the sole member of the Hestia familiar, with him beginning this series not as a hero, but instead a level 0. He also begins it by being chased by a minotaur. Luckily for him, he is saved by the one and only sword princess, one of the strongest and most famous adventurers around, with Bal falling in love with her at first sight. I mean, I don't really blame him. I think most people would fall in love with their rescuers if they were hot. Also, do you think her back gets cold? I don't know about you, but if I was fighting monsters, I would definitely be covering my back. Seems like a bit of an oversight. But regardless, Bal, after running away in shame and fear, exchanges the few monster crystals he has for some money and returns home.
神様、今帰りました。
Oh yeah, this is Hestia, the goddess that Bal is in service of, and if it isn't already clear, she loves him. Also, her back is exposed too. Is this going to be a trend? Oh my god, it is.
Another one. 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 And another one.
This might seem like a weird thing to fixate on, but once you notice it, you cannot unsee it. It's like Tarantino and his love of feet. I actually think in universe that they do provide a reason why you'd want to cover your back, since that's where your skills and ability sheet is. But whatever, the least divisive character of all time has made her entrance into the show, and with her comes this anime's fan service. Now for some people, what I'm currently showing on screen will be a massive turn off for them and make them disinterested in this anime. And for others, I've just given you 2 convincing reasons to add this to your watch list. To be clear to those who really don't like fan service, it is here. And it is here throughout all 5 seasons, although the frequency of it definitely decreases over time. But if you understandably can't stomach excessive fan service, you may find yourself bouncing off this anime. Now I on the other hand am a very shallow man, so all it took was me realising that Hestia is the same voice actress as Rem for me to like her. Anything else was a bonus. After being humiliated at a local tavern due to his current weak level, Bal is determined to become stronger, not just for his own image, and not just so that he can get the girl he likes, but also for Hestia and their familiar, so they can grow and gain recognition, and no longer be the laughingstock in town. Now this is a very fine premise, but it's also not the most exciting ever, and as I said, I was pretty underwhelmed and even a little disappointed in Danmachi's story. It wasn't until around the end of season 3, when the show was dealing with the Xenos and monster races, that I started to enjoy the narrative elements of Danmachi. And even then, I still didn't feel like I was watching anything special. It doesn't help that I had to trudge through the prostitute arc in season 2, which was honestly a little uncomfortable for me. Yeah, every now and then I did fluctuate between knowing that Bal was in an awful situation that I'd hate to be in, whilst also thinking that he was in an awful situation that I'd kind of love to be in.
It should have been me, not him! It's not fair!
But this was also the arc where I was subjected to watching this creature.
What the hell is even that?
思った通りうまそうだね
It doesn't help that the pacing in the earlier seasons isn't very good. It often feels as if we're rushing through things to the point that I occasionally couldn't tell if I was missing things or if the show just hadn't told me yet. And whilst this show does have pretty good world building, it is also very slow and takes a fair bit of time before it becomes compelling, where its true intricacies are revealed. And even though the animation was surprisingly good, if inconsistent, this is one of JC Staff's big boys, I couldn't help but shake the feeling that I was watching an inferior version of Wistoria. What confused me most was seeing that the light novel actually had a really good score. However, this confusion dissipated once I started watching season 4, because season 4 of Danmachi hits really hard. Season 4 of Danmachi is dark and brutal. People are getting bisected and decapitated in every episode. The stakes in this anime had never been so high. Bal and Mew have become separated from everyone else in the lower levels, whilst the rest of Bal's party is stuck fighting a dungeon boss without their leader and most powerful member. This season worked so well because it really felt like the characters were pushing themselves to their limit. Of course, at no point was I actually concerned that the characters wouldn't pull through, but it really got my heart pumping watching everyone think on their feet as they're thrust into the most desperate situation they've ever been in. Unsurprisingly, this also results in character development, something that a lot of the supporting players were in desperate need of. One of my biggest issues with this anime was how lackluster the majority of the characters are. Again, I'm aware that I'm comparing the show a lot to Wistoria, so apologies for that, but even with only one season under its belt, I feel a lot more attached to the characters in that anime than I do the ones present here. Hestia is a character that many Danmachi fans cannot stand, but I gravitated towards her. And I think it's because so many people here are such blank slates that she stuck out to me by comparison, as she actually had a definable and distinct personality. Well, for instance, is such a nothing burger. Yes, he does things every now and then, but I truly couldn't care less about him. And that disinterest and apathy extends to a lot of the characters here. Don't get me wrong, there are some brilliant characters too. Hermes is amazing. He's easily my favourite. He's silly and ridiculous, but as the anime reminds you, he's also one of the sharpest gods around. Eyes isn't the deepest character by any means, and her doll-like expressions make her very monotone, and for some people very bland, but she does receive a healthy dose of characterization over these seasons, including in the spin-off, which fleshes out the events from the first season and recontextualizes these events from Eyes' perspective. Now, the spin-off isn't a necessary viewing experience, and honestly it wasn't that great. Didn't help that Freya was a main character in it too. But it does expand on Eyes' character. Another one of the best individuals around was Ryu. She was easily one of the most likeable and interesting characters this series introduced, with her role progressively becoming more prominent, with the spotlight in Season 4 firmly being shone on her. Season 4, especially the second half, is fantastic due to the immense development it packages into Ryu's character. Her backstory, which had been alluded to in previous seasons, was quite sad, and I appreciate that this season actually took itself seriously and lent into its darker tone. It made Ryu's characterization and the blossoming relationship between Bal and Ryu so much more engaging. The dynamic between her and Bal was so entertaining and so well developed that I truly don't see how Bal could fall for anyone else. Ryu up to this point, like Eyes, have been fairly monotone and emotionless, so I love seeing how her growing affection for Bal brought out a cuter, girlier side that she likely wasn't even aware of herself. I may have some issues and complaints with Danmachi's characters, but Ryu definitely isn't one of them. I've liked her since Season 1. Speaking of character complaints, we get to see her, one of the most painfully underdeveloped and dull characters in this anime. Her relationship and feelings for Bal always felt forced and unnatural, and I never understood what point she served in this story. That is, until we get to Season 5, which, despite the deserved praise that Season 4 gets, is actually my favourite season of Danmachi. Every comment and negative thought I had about Seer being bland and boring, I took back the moment I watched Season 5, because the author played the long con with her. The Seer twist, at least for me, was so unexpected and legitimately great. The payoff to unexplained feelings for Bal was incredible, and I truthfully didn't see it coming. It left me mouth wide open, catching so many flies, and I genuinely felt like such an idiot for not figuring it out before the reveal. Especially when I went back to the first episode to get footage for this video and found that this twist was telegraphed from Seer's very first scene in the anime. Congratulations Amori Fujino, you pulled it off. Season 5 also finally gives us some insight into one of Danmachi's most interesting characters, Freya. Without getting into spoilers, Freya gets just as much attention and spotlight as Seer does. Before this season, Freya was this antagonistic force laying in wait on the sidelines. You always knew that she was going to have a major impact at some point, and that point is now. But what I like is that this seemingly untouchable goddess is anything but. She's lonely and depressed and far more vulnerable than one might expect. And I love that this season really took the time to humanise her and show signs of her that hadn't been seen before. She was always an intriguing character to me, but Season 5 made her a very three-dimensional one. I've spoken, perhaps a little too often, about how much I liked Wistoria Wand and Sword in this video, but there's a very simple reason for that, and it's to show the author's growth. Yes, Wistoria's undeniably better direction, cinematography, and animation than Danmachi, but I also think the story, at least in how it initially presents itself, is better than Danmachi's too, and that's because this is an author that's gotten better over time. Hence why the later seasons of this anime are noticeably better than its earlier ones, and why in my opinion, Wistoria is more enjoyable as it came out many years after Danmachi began, thus reflecting the lessons this writer has learned after spending so long crafting the tale in his original work. Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon is not my favourite anime. nor was it one that clicked with me initially, but it is one that grew on me, and I am very excited for whenever the next season comes out. However, that is only my opinion on this series. What is yours? Do you like Danmachi? Do you hate it? How does Wistoria compare for you? Let me know down below in the comments, and whilst you're down there, do be sure to click the like button. It helps both me and the video out. And if you're feeling especially generous, then do consider subscribing. I'd love to have you become a regular viewer. But until next time, thank you so much for watching this video, I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next one.
Bye bye!